to have the outside. Puff came to me the day before we were supposed to do the job there and told me that Heavy D didn't want us to do the security outside. I had 18 men ready to do the security outside with my dogs like I always do. People knew how we used to roll. We would have the pits, the Rottweilers, you understand? You know, we had that outside locked up. So anybody try to bum rush, anybody do that, we had the gates, the whole 9 yards. So we could stop all that. You know how people gonna get down in Harlem. You understand? So, and then when you got LL Cool J, you got Mike Tyson coming through there, and they coming through the front door so people see them. So they gonna go crazy. LL was the hottest thing out.
The internet didn't wake up ready for this. No warning. No countdown. Just one quiet move that turned timelines into war zones and comment sections into crime scenes. While people were busy arguing about yesterday's drama, 50 Cent slid into the conversation like a seasoned villain who knows exactly when to press play. A new documentary dropped. Alleged footage started circulating. And suddenly the internet realized this wasn't just content. It was a reminder. Because when 50 Cent moves, it's never accidental. It's never emotional. And it's definitely never harmless. This wasn't a diss track. This wasn't a tweet storm. This was a full-scale documentary release timed perfectly to ignite a firestorm involving long-whispered allegations, resurfaced clips, and a name the industry treats like sacred ground. And once the alleged video started making rounds, the laughter stopped, screens froze, group chats lit up. Celebrities went suspiciously quiet. This makes rap beef look like playground arguments. This makes reality TV drama feel like background noise. Because when 50 Cent decides to document instead of joke, it hits different. It feels calculated. It feels patient. It feels like someone finally decided the whispers weren't quiet enough anymore. The moment the documentary went live, the internet stopped pretending this was just another celebrity rollout. No teaser campaign, no flashy countdown. Just a quiet upload that detonated like a pressure cooker finally losing its seal. Because when 50 Cent releases a documentary instead of a diss track, people know this isn't entertainment for entertainment's sake. This is curation. This is memory with a purpose. To understand why this landed like a thunderclap, you have to understand 50's relationship with timing. He doesn't rush the room, he studies it. He lets narratives age, lets jokes turn stale, lets whispers become habits. And only when the culture is tired of pretending does he step in and say, "Remember this?" That's what this documentary felt like. Not an accusation, not a verdict, an archival reminder that some stories never went away. They just got buried under playlists and parties. The rollout was unsettling because it was understated. No grand claims. No courtroom language. Just a careful sequence of interviews, public moments, and cultural artifacts that people had already seen but never together. And when you stitch history that way, it stops feeling random. It starts feeling patterned. That's the uncomfortable power of context. Then the alleged video surfaced, not trumpeted as proof, not framed as a smoking gun. Just introduced into the conversation like a question mark that refuses to leave the sentence. Where did it come from? What does it show? Why is it being discussed now? The ambiguity did the heavy lifting. Because ambiguity invites debate, and debate invites attention. And attention is exactly what forces cultures to look at what they've been avoiding. Reaction came in waves. First, disbelief. Then outrage. Then the familiar scramble for position. Fans declared that 50 was finally forcing the industry to confront long-whispered claims. Critics warned about the dangers of speculation and the ethics of platforming alleged footage without definitive context. Both sides talked past each other, louder by the minute because the story refused to settle into a neat box. The timing raised eyebrows immediately. Why release this now, when public patience for celebrity immunity feels thin? Supporters said timing is the message that conversations only move when pressure exists. Skeptics argued it was opportunistic, a calculated strike during a volatile moment. But even critics had to admit one thing: the content didn't feel rushed. It felt prepared. What made the situation stranger was what didn't happen. No immediate wave of emphatic denials. No coordinated defenses flooding timelines. No celebrity chorus singing the same song. Instead, there was quiet, measured quiet. The kind that suggests conversations are happening off camera with phones on mute and lawyers on speed dial. In a culture addicted to instant reactions, silence reads like strategy, and 50 Cent stayed exactly where he wanted to be, just outside the blast radius. He posted jokes, he liked comments. He leaned into sarcasm without clarifying anything. It's a familiar move, say less, let the internet do more. Because once a conversation reaches critical mass, explanations only slow it down. The documentary itself didn't need to accuse anyone outright. It did something more effective. It juxtaposed old interviews against present-day reactions, public moments against private rumors that were always treated like punchlines. The effect wasn't hysteria, it was unease. Viewers weren't being told what to think. They were being asked why they hadn't thought harder before. That's when the memes sharpened. Jokes compared the release to opening a time capsule nobody wanted unearthed. Others said this made rap beef look like customer service complaints politely ignored. The humor was loud, but it carried tension. Because humor is how people cope when they don't know what comes next. Industry insiders spoke without really speaking. Vague posts about truth, context, and letting things play out. No names, no commitments. That careful neutrality fed speculation, because neutrality at moments like this often means uncertainty, not confidence. And uncertainty is COMBUSTIBLE. Critics aimed their fire at 50's motives. They dragged up his past feuds, questioned his ethics, accused him of monetizing discomfort. But those critiques kept colliding with an inconvenient reality. The material existed. The history existed. Disliking the messenger didn't erase the archive. Supporters pushed back just as hard. They argued that documentaries aren't verdicts. They're lenses. That asking questions isn't the same as making claims. That the culture has a habit of protecting power by mocking anyone who challenges it. And they pointed out that 50 didn't invent the moments he showcased, he assembled them. That distinction mattered. Even to people who hated it. As views climbed, reaction channels dissected every frame like it might blink first. Every pause was analyzed. Every cut was scrutinized. The documentary became bigger than itself, morphing into a conversation nobody could fully control. That's when the discomfort settled in. Because the internet is excellent at outrage, but terrible at sitting with unresolved questions. The alleged video sat at the center of that discomfort. People debated origin, intent, relevance. Was it incomplete? Was it misunderstood? Should it be shared at all? The lack of definitive answers kept the story alive. Certainty ends debates. Ambiguity keeps them feeding, and through it all the most unsettling realization crept in quietly. This conversation had been delayed, not avoided. The culture didn't lack information, it lacked appetite. Now the appetite was here, and it was ravenous. This wasn't closure. It was ignition. Because once people revisit old moments with new context, they don't unsee them. Once patterns are suggested, they don't evaporate with a meme. They linger, reshaping how future stories are received. That's the quiet consequence. Of documentation, it doesn't shout. It waits. Whether viewers believed the implications or rejected them outright, one thing became undeniable. The documentary forced attention onto a history the culture had learned to laugh past. And laughter, as it turns out, is a flimsy shield when context arrives with receipts and patience. The real shock wasn't the alleged footage. It was the reminder that stories don't disappear just because they're inconvenient, they wait. And sometimes, all it takes is one carefully timed release to bring them roaring back into the room. Once the documentary escaped the platform and spilled into the wider internet, the reaction didn't just grow, it fractured. The timeline split into camps within hours, each one convinced they were watching a completely different story. And that's when the real chaos started. Because nothing fuels a fire like ambiguity mixed with ego. Memes led the charge, as always. Screenshots were clipped, cropped, captioned, and weaponized at record speed. People joke that 50 Cent didn't drop a documentary, he dropped a pop quiz the industry wasn't ready for. Others said this made rap beef look like customer service. Complaints politely ignored. The jokes were sharp, but they were nervous. Laughs landed with an edge. Because humor is the easiest way to avoid sitting with discomfort. Then came the neutral takes, which were somehow the loudest of all. Influencers rushed to post threads explaining why they were just asking questions, while carefully asking only the questions that kept engagement high. Reaction channels recorded emergency episodes with thumbnails screaming, "This is insane," followed by 20 minutes of hedging. Podcasts promised balance, while picking sides through tone alone. Everyone wanted to be part of the moment, but nobody wanted responsibility for where it landed. Celebrity reactions followed the same pattern of strategic silence and vague signaling. No formal statements, no full-throated defenses. Just likes, unfollows, cryptic emojis, and quotes about truth, context, and letting things play out. In an industry built on rapid damage control, that quiet felt intentional. When powerful people don't rush to speak, it usually means they're waiting to see which way the wind blows. And 50 Cent? He hovered like a man watching a chessboard 3 moves ahead. He didn't clarify the alleged footage. He didn't expand on implications. He leaned into sarcasm just enough to remind everyone he was enjoying the spectacle without owning it. A joke here, a like there. The message was clear without being stated. The conversation is bigger than him now. Once the internet latches on, explanations only slow the burn. Criticism sharpened fast. Detractors accused 50 of exploiting a serious situation for attention, of blurring the line between documentation and provocation. They argued that releasing alleged footage without airtight context invites misinformation. They warned about trial by internet and the dangers of letting algorithms replace due process. On paper, those arguments sounded reasonable. In practice, they collided with a wall the culture keeps running into. Why does this feel different? Because the outrage wasn't happening in a vacuum. It landed in a moment when public patience for celebrity immunity feels thin, when people are exhausted by whispered stories that never go anywhere, when silence has started to look less like caution and more like protection. The documentary didn't create that fatigue, it tapped into it. Pop culture comparisons went nuclear. Some said this felt like opening a time capsule nobody wanted buried. Others compared it to a slow burn thriller where the scariest moments aren't loud, they're familiar. One viral post joked that 50 didn't leak anything. He turned the lights on and let people notice what was already in the room. Another said this makes celebrity documentaries look like bedtime stories by comparison. The alleged video became the gravitational center of the debate. People argued about its origin, its relevance, its framing. Was it incomplete? Was it being misinterpreted? Should it be circulated at all? Every question spawned 10 more, and the lack of definitive answers kept the conversation alive. Certainty ends debates. Ambiguity feeds them, and feeds the algorithm. Industry whispers grew louder without becoming clearer. Anonymous sources claimed everyone had known about rumors for years without explaining what that meant. Others hinted that more material existed somewhere without saying where. Some dismissed the documentary as old news repackaged for clicks, while others warned that this was only the beginning. The contradictions didn't resolve anything. They multiplied confusion, which is internet fuel. What didn't happen was resolution. No comprehensive rebuttal arrived to shut it down. No decisive proof emerged to settle it either. The story hovered in that dangerous middle space where nothing is confirmed, but nothing feels dismissible. That's the worst place for reputations to sit because it invites endless interpretation. The backlash toward 50 intensified as the days passed. People dragged his past feuds, his trolling history, his reputation for stirring chaos as if discrediting him would erase the content. But that tactic only highlighted something uncomfortable. Attacking the messenger doesn't make the archive disappear. It just proves people don't want to confront what the archive suggests. Supporters pushed back. With equal force, they argued that documentaries are lenses, not verdicts. That raising questions isn't the same as making accusations. that the culture has a habit of mocking uncomfortable stories until someone powerful enough forces attention. And they pointed out a fact critics struggled to counter. 50 didn't invent the moments he showcased.
He curated them. That distinction mattered, even if it made people uneasy. As the conversation spread beyond hip-hop,
Commentators from outside the culture weighed in. They framed it as a broader issue of power, accountability, and selective outrage. Why do some allegations linger as jokes while others trigger immediate reckoning? Who decides when a story becomes too serious to ignore? And why does discomfort often get labeled as defamation instead of an invitation to investigate? The internet didn't have answers. It had opinions, memes, and fatigue. Arguments looped, sides hardened. And through it all, the documentary kept pulling views, proving one undeniable truth: people are hungry for reckoning. Even when they pretend they just want drama. By the end of this phase, the story hadn't cooled. It had deepened. The debate wasn't about what was shown anymore. It was about what happens next. About whether the culture is capable of holding two ideas at once, that allegations are serious and should be handled carefully, and that ignoring them entirely is also a choice with consequences. Lines were drawn, not between innocence and guilt that would require facts no one had yet, but between those who wanted the conversation to disappear and those who refused to let it fade quietly. And that division ensured one thing. By the time the outrage machine began looping the same arguments, something irreversible had already happened. The temperature changed. This wasn't a trend anymore. It was a pressure shift. The documentary and the alleged video didn't deliver a verdict, but they did something far more disruptive. They reintroduced doubt where certainty once lived. And once doubt moves in, it rearranges the furniture. That's when consequences start showing up quietly. Not with sirens or headlines, but with hesitation. Invitations that stall, collaborations that need more time, interviews that suddenly pivot to safer topics. The public image doesn't shatter overnight. It develops hairline fractures that only become obvious in hindsight. And this moment, whether people admit it or not, added a few cracks that won't buff out easily. For Diddy's public perception, the impact was uneven but undeniable. Supporters mobilized fast, warning against internet trials and reminding everyone that allegations are not convictions. That caution mattered, and it was valid. But it existed alongside an uncomfortable silence from corners that usually move quickly to defend power. No unified chorus, no loud rebuttal tour, just careful language and measured distance. In this business, distance is a message. Industry relationships don't explode. They cool. When controversy hits this scale, people protect themselves by lowering the volume. They don't cancel, they pause, they don't condemn, they defer. The effect is subtle, but it's real. Momentum softens. The room gets quieter. And quiet rooms change careers more than loud ones ever do. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's position hardened into something unmistakable. He wasn't posturing as a judge or a hero. He stayed in his familiar lane, the archivist with a smirk, the instigator, who refuses to let stories evaporate.
he didn't say, "This is the truth." He said, "This is what you ignored."
That framing is dangerous because it shifts responsibility away from the messenger and onto the culture that laughed first and asked questions later. Love him or hate him. That move has power because it forces a reckoning without claiming moral superiority. It says, "I didn't make this history, I organized it." An organization, when it reveals patterns, hits harder than accusations ever could. The backlash he took was loud, but it didn't dent the reach. If anything, it amplified it. Outrage is still engagement, and engagement is still oxygen. The public response matured, just slightly. Some viewers admitted the documentary didn't convince them, but it unsettled them. Others said it changed how they remembered old moments. A portion rejected the entire premise outright, choosing to guard nostalgia like a family heirloom. The division stuck because it wasn't about facts being settled. It was about comfort being challenged. And discomfort keeps conversations alive longer than certainty ever will. The biggest consequence wasn't legal or professional. It was cultural. This episode exposed how selective outrage really is. How quickly we demand accountability from some and patience for others. How often whispers are dismissed as jokes until someone with leverage refuses to laugh. And how uneasy we get when entertainment collides with responsibility. Because this wasn't a fun scandal. It was heavy, unresolved, and awkward, and the internet isn't built to sit with awkward. As days passed, the story slid out of trending tabs and into long-form spaces, podcasts, panels, think pieces, late-night debates that don't explode, but linger. That's where narratives calcify. That's where reputations quietly change shape. Not with a bang, but with a footnote that never leaves. Whether the allegations withstand scrutiny or fall apart under it, the reminder remains: stories don't disappear just because they're inconvenient. They wait. They resurface when conditions change. And sometimes all it takes is one carefully timed release to bring them roaring back into the room. This didn't end careers. It complicated them. It added question marks and asterisks, those tiny symbols that follow names long after headlines move on. And in the public imagination, asterisks matter. They color future coverage. They influence how silence is interpreted. They make defenses sound rehearsed and jokes land flat. The internet moved on, as it always does, but it didn't forget. And neither did 50 Cent. That's the unsettling part. This didn't feel like a final act. It felt like a reminder that more history exists, more context can surface, and more conversations can be forced if someone decides the moment is right. The documentary didn't close a chapter. It loosened the binding. The real aftermath will show up later. In interviews that dodge, in partnerships that never materialize, in names that stop being mentioned as casually as before, in audiences that watch a little more closely, laugh a little less easily, and ask questions they used to shrug off. That's how cultural consequences work: quiet, slow, and permanent. This wasn't a victory lap or a takedown, it was destabilization. And in an industry built on image control, destabilization is terrifying. Because once narratives slip out of carefully managed hands, they don't return obediently. They spread, mutate, and resurface at the worst possible times. Whatever happens next, one thing is already certain: the jokes won't land the same. The nostalgia won't feel as comfortable. And the silence won't read as neutral anymore. Now, before you scroll away like nothing just happened, pause for 1 second. Because this wasn't just another celebrity headline you half listened to while doing something else. This was a pressure crack. And whether you loved it, hated it, or felt uncomfortable the entire time, that reaction means the story landed exactly where it was supposed to. So let's make it count. If this documentary made you rethink old jokes, old clips, or old everybody knew conversations, smash that like button like it's been hiding secrets for years. If you think 50 Cent crossed a line, hit like anyway, because disagreement still fuels the conversation. And silence is exactly how stories like this get buried again. Now jump into the comments and say it with your chest. Is 50 forcing overdue conversations, or is this chaos disguised as content? Should moments like this be examined publicly or handled quietly behind closed doors? Don't play it safe. This comment section is where the real debate lives, not the PR statements. And don't forget to subscribe, because this channel doesn't wait for narratives to settle before breaking them down. We cover the mess while it's still uncomfortable, while people are still dodging questions, and while the internet is pretending not to care but refreshing nonstop. When the next clip resurfaces, the next documentary drops, or the next alleged situation explodes overnight, you'll want to be here early, not